Well, welcome back as we continue our discussion on the founding of the National Black MBA Association. We spent time earlier talking about what was going on in 1969 and 1970. We got a little bit into what was happening in that transition year of 1971 and 1972. So we are honored today to have with us Mr. Carl Fields and Miss Ernestine, who are both going to say just a few words about their role. Carl in 1971 and pulling together the second conference, and Miss Ernestine, who had a lot to do with the incorporation of the organization. So, Carl, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Catherine. Carl Fields Jr., as you stated. And when I entered the campus at the University of Chicago in 1970, I had heard about the conference that had been held in the spring of 1970. Met some folks who were involved. I was interested. But what happened is that a lot of the individuals were no longer active or involved in trying to move the organization forward. So one of the individuals at the university, William Preston, got together with me and said, "Hey, Carl, are you interested?" And I said, "Yes." So to make the long story short, I kind of became the coordinator for the next conference that was going to be held in the spring of '71. So along with the able help of the dean of the business school at that time at the University of Chicago, 9 people from around the country converged on the campus at the University of Chicago in the spring of '71. And that's where we followed up on the resolution that had been passed at the 1970 conference regarding the formation of the organization.
Very good. And I understand you were a president of the organization?
Well, once we got our act together, if you will, and moved the operation to New York, yes, they selected me as the president of the organization, with Karen Williamson as the vice president, Ernestine as the treasurer, and Thelma Austin as the secretary. And so we began the journey with post office boxes and using office space of people that we knew to try to pull together the organization from a chapter standpoint.
Wonderful. All right, Miss Ernestine, share with us a few words about your involvement.
Well, Ernestine Wallace Adams, and thank you, Catherine. Well, I attended the conference in Chicago where I met Carl. And when we decided to incorporate, I, of course, was back in New York. And Carl and I were talking long distance, trying to get the information that I needed so that I could incorporate the organization. So I was living in Johnson Hall at the time, since I was still a student, and that was the address that was actually on the incorporation papers, Johnson Hall, New York City. And that was when we got it off the ground and started with the New York chapter, and then we expanded across the country to other chapters. And it went well. You know, we found out that people come to meetings when you have food at the time. So we made sure that we had something for everyone to eat, and we got a pretty decent crowd. So it went okay, wouldn't you say, Carl?
Yeah, it started out, and that axiom's still true today. So about food and us coming to meetings. So it worked, and we found a lot of enthusiasm. And the chapters, the one that I am kind of partial to is the chapter in Chicago. And a good friend of mine, Bill Rodney, who unfortunately recently passed, he put together the first Chicago chapter. And so he and I communicated quite a bit. And the organization began to grow and continued to do so until I stepped away a couple of years later.
Hmm. Okay, well, thank you. It has just been marvelous to hear these first person comments on what was happening because you all were there. And it is priceless to be able to hear from you what went down in order to get this organization started. So thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you for having us.
Mhm.